His father built towers that touched the sky, but buried lives beneath concrete and silence. Now, the heir stands at the edge of it all, and instead of wearing the crown, he lights the match. Before we begin, if stories of courage, justice, and transformation speak to your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Moments That Heal. We bring you powerful tales that move you, heal you, and stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Now, let us take you into the fire. It didn't smell like lilies. Gabriel Crane had attended enough funerals in his life to know that. Most of them reeked of guilt masked in floral arrangements, the stale perfume of reconciliation too late. But his father's funeral? It reeked of cement. Wet cement. Cold, unfinished. Quietly expanding into every crack it could find. The memorial was held inside the atrium of Crane Tower, the crown jewel of the late Walter Crane's empire, a 40-story glass and steel monstrosity that scraped the Manhattan skyline like a claw. And today, beneath its vaulted ceiling of imported Italian marble and LED panels, streaming a curated slideshow of Walter's legacy. The guests arrived in silence, not grief, silence. They came in sleek black cars with bulletproof windows. Former presidents, oil barons, tech billionaires, who'd once bought land from Walter at triple market value and never questioned the fine print. Paparazzi weren't allowed, but they hovered outside like wolves, their lenses twitching with hunger. The empire had fallen. Now everyone wanted to know who would inherit the ashes. Gabriel stood alone at the front, his posture flawless, his hands clasped behind his back like a sculpture carved from tension. 36 years old, impeccably dressed in a navy suit with no tie because Walter hated ties, his expression unreadable. The eulogy was a series of transactions in disguise. Executives from Crane Global took turns at the mic, their voices smooth, hollow. Words like visionary, titan, pioneer echoed through the marble like a well-rehearsed script from a PR department on autopilot. No one mentioned the scandals, the backroom deals, the zoning law violations, the community displacements. The child. Gabriel once saw crying on the curb while bulldozers flattened her apartment, the girl no one ever saw again. And then they asked Gabriel to speak. He stepped forward. The podium stood under a massive digital portrait of his father, Walter, in his prime, grinning like a man who'd just stolen the moon and dared you to ask how. Gabriel looked up at that face and felt nothing. No rage, no sorrow, just wait. He didn't touch the mic. He didn't need to. His voice, when it came, was calm, controlled, surgical. Walter Crane was not a good man, but he was a great one, in the oldest, most brutal sense of the word. There was a murmur, like a wind brushing over broken glass. He built this empire from blood and concrete, from loopholes and favors. He taught me how to win, but not how to rest. How to dominate, but never how to forgive. He made me the man you see today. And that is why I'm terrified. He paused. The silence was no longer polite, because if I continue in his image, I will destroy everything that still deserves to live. A low cough from the back, sharp intake of breath near the front row where his mother, Clara Crane, sat like a porcelain doll glazed in sorrow and suspicion. She said nothing, just blinked once. Slowly, so today, Gabriel said, I bury not only a father, but a god. And tomorrow, I will decide whether this temple should still stand. And just like that, he turned away. No applause, no condemnation. Just eyes, dozens, hundreds of eyes watching him walk down the aisle like a man who had not just attended a funeral, but declared war. He didn't stop at the exit. Not when Clara hissed his name behind him. Not when one of the board members reached for his sleeve. Not when a security detail whispered something urgent into his earpiece. He didn't care. Because in his pocket, warm against his thigh, was a flash drive. Encased in mahogany, no label, no serial number. Just one thing carved into the wood, for Gabriel if he dares. He found it tucked into his father's will, not in the official version, but the second one. The private version, hand-delivered, by a lawyer with trembling fingers and sweat at his collar. Mr. Crane, the lawyer had whispered, eyes darting. Your father said you'd know when to open it. Gabriel hadn't opened it yet. Not because he was afraid, because he already knew. He knew the flash drive didn't contain love letters, or stock portfolios, or teary-eyed confessions. It contained architecture, blueprints, a digital autopsy of the empire Walter built. Every skeleton, every offshore account, every journalist silenced with a handshake and a threat. And his own name, Gabriel Crane, would be there. God. On contracts, he never read. On permits, he never questioned, because Walter didn't raise a son. He manufactured a successor as the elevator doors closed behind him, sealing him off from the cells. Glossine marble mausoleum. Gabriel stared at his reflection in the polished steel. Same sharp cheekbones, same predator's posture, same fire in the eyes. But something had cracked. And through that crack, light, no truth, had begun to burn. He pulled out the flash drive, turned it over in his hand. And for the first time since Walter Crane died, Gabriel smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had just remembered he could choose, and tomorrow he would choose fire. The cursor blinked, a steady, almost mocking beat. Like a digital metronome counting down the life Gabriel had been handed, and the one he was about to dismantle. He sat alone in his father's private office, 29 floors above the city. No staff, no bodyguards. Just the quiet hum of the server tower Walter Crane had built to store the family's true fortune, not money, but secrets. He inserted the flash drive. A folder popped open. Operative dossiers. Another one. Land reclamation projects. Suppressed. Then, classified. Blue Vulture Protocol. Gabriel clicked, and the empire unraveled before his eyes. There were maps with red lines slicing, across city blocks like arteries clogged with corruption. Names of families relocated with zero legal process, entire neighborhoods flattened for the promise of luxury high-rises that were never built. Non-profit foundations that were fronts for laundering, spreadsheet labeled candidate influence. Index showing payoffs to local officials, senators, judges, even federal agents. His name was on 7 contracts, not forged, not coerced. Signed, he remembered them. Barely signatures rushed through between board meetings, retreats, media, events, standard approvals, his legal chief had said. Minor property acquisitions. They weren't minor. They were terminal. You were his scalpel. A voice echoed in his head. What? It was his father's. Smooth, proud, a clean-cut leaves less blood. Gabriel leaned back, his chest tight. The room felt smaller now, suffocating despite its size. The air smelled like rich leather and regret. He clicked into a subfolder. Media compliance. Tier 1. There she was, Sasha Green. Investigative journalist, found dead 6 years ago in what the tabloids called a tragic fall. She had been looking into the Blue Vulture sites. He remembered seeing her name once, on a press request. Denied, of course, standard protocol, but her file said otherwise. Tier 1 intervention approved. Executed via D5 contact. No PR exposure. His hand clenched into a fist. There was no forgetting this now, no returning to boardrooms with glass smiles and synergy charts. His own reflection on the dark screen seemed to stare back at him. With quiet accusation, he reached for the intercom. "Ms. Lane," he said, his voice calm, "clear my schedule for the week. And bring me Mr. Armitage's resignation letter." There was a long pause. "Sir, he hasn't submitted one." Gabriel exhaled slowly. "He will." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the mirrored wall that looked out over the Hudson River. The skyline glinted like a crown of knives. Somewhere below, thousands of people walked streets that once belonged to someone else, stolen, gentrified, priced into oblivion. Walter hadn't just crushed communities, he'd mechanized. Their erasure, and Gabriel had been his loyal technician? Not anymore, that afternoon. The first board meeting without Walter Crane in attendance was held behind closed doors. The atmosphere was charged, the kind of tension that comes not from grief, but from power. Unclaimed. 12 directors sat at the oval obsidian table, dressed in somber grays and expensive nervousness. Gabriel took the head seat. Clara Crane sat opposite him, her expression carved from frost. "Let's begin," he said. Gabriel, Clara interrupted. Her voice soft but sharp. "Your speech yesterday raised concerns. Walter's legacy is not on trial," Gabriel cut in. Yet a few gasps. Armitage, the CFO, adjusted his glasses. "I assume you've reviewed your father's transition plans." "The Crane Development Initiative in Jakarta terminated," Gabriel said flatly. Murmurs flared. Armitage blinked. "Terminated. That's a $2.3 billion project built on forcibly acquired land. Land we do not own, morally or legally. We're not proceeding." "You're making a mistake," Clara said coldly. "This board exists to safeguard Walter's vision." "No," Gabriel said. "It exists to safeguard Crane Global. Starting today, that means safeguarding our soul." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. "Commissioning an external audit. Full transparency. Every subsidiary, every shell company, every strategic partner. All of it." "You'll destroy us," Armitage hissed. Gabriel's voice was low, controlled, deadly calm. "If the truth can destroy us, then we should be destroyed." He looked at each director in turn. "But if we survive the fire, we build something better, something worth leading." No one spoke, except Clara. "I see," she said, rising from her seat. "Then I suppose I'll see you in court." Their eyes met, and in hers, Gabriel saw the real wound. Not rage, not even betrayal, but fear. Not of losing wealth, but of losing the myth of Walter Crane. He nodded once, not with anger, but with clarity. "You do what you have to do, Mother. I'll do what's right." That night, alone in his penthouse, Gabriel opened a file folder labeled Project Ember. A new model, new vision. He didn't want a monument. He wanted a movement. Housing. Designed around people, not profits. Urban landscapes with dignity. AI-powered planning for efficiency, transparency, and inclusion. Real jobs, real wages. Corporate structure where workers had equity. Where no neighborhood was priced out of its own future. He could already hear the sneers. From the industry, idealist, naive, dangerous, but he'd been dangerous before. For the wrong reasons, now he would be dangerous for the right ones. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think you can tear it down and walk away clean? We made you. We own you." D5 Gabriel stared at it, then deleted it. Not out of fear, but because he finally understood. Something his father never did. You don't kill a machine by smashing one gear. You change its purpose, or you set it on fire. And build something better from the ash. Gabriel Crane hadn't walked a city block in years, not without a convoy, not without tinted glass and tailored distractions. But today, he wore sneakers, a gray hoodie, no entourage. No press, no armor. The old neighborhood of Briar Hollow sat. Just beyond the East River, fenced in by a skyline that had priced it out of its own air. Once a tight-knit immigrant borough, it's now a fractured reminder of what real estate could devour when profit outpaced conscience, and Crane. Global had devoured it whole. Gabriel stepped past a rusted sign. Future site of Crane Arts District. Letters had faded, so had the dream. Half the buildings were still boarded up. The arts never came. The artists couldn't afford to. He pulled the hood lower and entered what used to be St. Helena's Shelter, now a makeshift community center, run by volunteers. No security gates, no polished marble, just chipped paint, plastic chairs, and the smell of soup too thin to feed hope. "Help you?" a woman asked from behind a folding table. Early 60s. Sharp eyes. Her name tag read, Maria Jameson. Gabriel froze. He knew that name. Walter Crane had sued her nonprofit 10 years ago for zoning interference. Drove her to bankruptcy. She rebuilt from scratch. "Just visiting," he said quietly. "Press." She snapped. "No, developer." He hesitated. Not anymore. She narrowed her eyes. Everyone's something, especially here. He glanced at the wall behind her, a collage of children's drawings taped over legal eviction notices. In the center, a picture of a tall man in a suit with red scribbles across his face. The word monster scrawled in crayon. Gabriel's stomach turned. That suit was his father's. The face, stylized but unmistakable, and next to it, a second drawing of a boy with a gold crown burning a black tower. His hands clenched at his sides. Maria followed his gaze. The kids have nightmares. We let them draw them out. Do they know who built the tower? They know enough. Their parents were forced out to make room for it. Some slept in their cars. Others never came back. Silence. Stretched between them, "I'm sorry," he said, the words tasting strange. Maria stared at him. Then something shifted in her brow, not recognition, but curiosity. "You don't look like someone who says sorry a lot. I didn't used to. You sound like you're here to fix something." "Maybe," he replied. "It's not too late." She tilted her head. "It's always too late for something, but never for everything." A door creaked open behind her. A young girl peeked out. Maybe 10 years old, stringy hair, oversized hoodie, eyes like a storm holding back. Thunder. "This is Ava," Maria said gently. Her family lived on 6th and Briar. Got bought out by Crane Properties in 18. They told her parents it was for community improvement, then raised rents by 300%. Gabriel couldn't look away from the girl's eyes. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. He dropped to one knee. "I'm trying to make things right," he said. Ava looked at him flatly. "You the one who made it wrong?" He swallowed. "Yes." She turned and walked away, and somehow that hurt more than the shouting would have that night. Gabriel stood in his father's old study, the only room in the penthouse he hadn't remodeled. Everything was still in place, the antique bourbon decanter, the ivory chess set, the oil painting of a lion that Walter insisted looked like him. Gabriel moved to the bookshelf and pulled a volume titled Empire and Ethics. Behind it, a small panel clicked open. Inside, an encrypted file terminal, long disconnected from the company's network. He plugged in the flash drive. A new folder appeared. Not financials, and not real estate maps, but video files. Dozens hidden recordings of boardroom meetings, undercover footage of community protests infiltrated by paid agitators, a clip of Walter Crane himself snarling at an assistant. Give them just enough to shut up. Breadcrumbs. Never bread. And one file labeled Gabriel, age 14. He clicked. The screen lit up with a grainy image. A boy, lanky, serious, dressed in a blazer too big, sat across from Walter. "Say it again," Walter demanded off camera. "People are not obstacles," the boy repeated. "They are assets. And what if they resist? Then we move the liability." "Good," Walter growled. "You'll lead someday." Gabriel stared at the boy's eyes on the screen. They were hollow. Not innocent. Not angry. Just obedient. That was the first crack in the wall. Not a scream. Not a scandal. But obedience taught young, reinforced daily. He shut the laptop and stood. No more silence. No more waiting for forgiveness that would never come. He picked up the phone and dialed a direct line. "Get me city council," he said. "I want a public hearing. Full exposure of our land use since 2005. I'll testify, sir," his assistant stammered. "That's political suicide." "No," Gabriel said. "It's a blueprint." He looked out the window. Across the skyline, the towers still stood, monuments to a man who had conquered cities like chess pieces. But tomorrow, he'd start tipping them over, one by one. The Crane family did not mourn. They performed. So when Clara Crane arrived unannounced at the penthouse, just after sunrise, flanked by 2 attorneys and an assistant with eyes sharper than her heels, Gabriel knew this wasn't a visit. It was a declaration of war. She wore gray, always gray, like ash that had never cooled. A pearl brooch on her lapel, shaped like a swan. No coat, no umbrella. Not a single drop of rain touched her. As if even the weather remembered to fear her, Gabriel met her in the great room, where the light from the 35th floor bled gold across polished floors. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching her reflection move like a phantom behind him. "I see you've taken to theatrics," she said. "I see you've brought lawyers to breakfast," he replied. Clara didn't smile. She never wasted gestures on what she didn't mean. "We need to discuss your performance," she said, lowering herself into a leather armchair with the grace of someone born to command palaces. "You mean the hearing?" Gabriel turned. "Or the press leak that followed?" Clara's eyes flared for half a second, then dulled again, hardening like blown glass. "You humiliated your father's board. You compromised proprietary contracts. You're behaving like a child, Gabriel, a spiteful one." "I'm 36, he said calmly, not exactly skipping. "Recess. You are dismantling everything we built." "No," Gabriel said. "I'm dismantling what he built. You just curated it." A beat of silence. Clara folded her gloved hands. "There was a time you listened," she said softly. "A time you respected this family's name. Do you remember what I told you when your father first gave you the keys to this empire?" Gabriel didn't answer, so she did. "Your crown is not a right, Gabriel. It's a mirror. It reflects what you are, not what you wish to be." "I remember," he said. "I just stopped mistaking glass for truth." One of the attorneys cleared his throat. "Mrs. Crane would like to discuss terms regarding her shares." Gabriel held up a hand. "Don't. Not in this room. She's going to knife me? I'd rather it be clean." Clara's eyes didn't flicker. "You always thought I was the softer one." "You were the softer one, until he died. You wear his bones like armor. He raised you to lead. No, he raised me to replace him." Gabriel walked to the center of the room and set a folder on the glass coffee table between them. It was thick, stamped, confidential, internal audit, Crane Global, charitable subsidiaries. "Here's what I found," he said. "Misused funds, inflated land valuations, donations rerouted through shell orgs into offshore accounts, all signed off by father, some by you." Clara didn't look down. She already knew. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want transparency, a full restructure. Every cent traced. Every board member who profited under false pretenses, gone, including you." She laughed then. Not a warm laugh. A sound like crystal cracking under heat. "And who will run it?" "You and your bleeding heart interns. Rebuild the board from scratch. Diverse, ethical, transparent." You sound like a nonprofit slogan. You sound like someone who's still capable of change. Clara rose to her feet. "You're naive. I'm awake." She stepped closer, inches from him now. And for the first time, Gabriel noticed her age, the delicate fractures beneath the surface, the exhaustion behind the sculpted cheekbones. "You think goodness wins?" she asked. "That justice builds towers?" "No," he said, "but it keeps them standing longer." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I'll see you in court." Gabriel nodded. "I thought you might." The lawsuit went public 2 days later. Crane matriarch sues son for breach of trust. Every outlet ran the headline. Some more gleefully than others. Wall Street speculated. Talk shows dissected. Shareholders panicked. Behind closed doors, the old guard began circling like vultures, half hoping Clara would win, half hoping they could swoop in if both mother and son bled out. But Gabriel didn't blink. He filed counterclaims. He published the audit, and then he made the first appointment to his new board. Her name was Lenara Gaines, a black, single mother of 2 who had spent her life fighting housing corruption in South Chicago. No Ivy League degree, no legacy wealth, but she knew the game because she'd spent 20 years losing to it and never quit. The day she stepped into the tower's executive floor, every eye turned, not in doubt, but in reckoning. And Gabriel stood beside her proudly. "I don't want new wallpaper," he told the press. "I want new walls." That night, he sat alone in the penthouse's empty dining room. The crystal chandelier above cast fractured light across an untouched meal. He poured a glass of bourbon, but he didn't drink it. Instead, he He stared at the opposite chair, the one his mother used to sit in. Back when dinner meant power briefings? Back when she'd raise a glass to a new acquisition, and he'd pretend not to notice her wedding ring was turned inward? Now, the chair was cold. Like her signature on the lawsuit, he slid the bourbon across. The table, a toast to the ghost, not to Walter, to Clara, mother of steel, mother of glass, and tomorrow he'd begin breaking her empire too, not out of vengeance, but because even glass castles need light, and Gabriel Crane was done living in shadows. The boardroom was colder than usual. Gabriel Crane had entered 100 times before, but never like this, never with half the chairs. Occupied by men who'd once toasted his father and now watched him like a virus in a petri dish. The air was sharp with cologne and mistrust. The long obsidian table gleamed like a blade, and at its head, Gabriel stood alone. Across from him sat 7 legacy board members, all male, all older, all holding folders embossed with the Crane Global logo like it was scripture. And at the center, Arthur Pennington, senior counsel and longtime consigliere to Walter Crane. "Before we begin," Arthur said, adjusting his glasses, "I'd like to remind everyone this session is being recorded for the minutes and streamed live to shareholders." Gabriel didn't blink. He wanted it that way. Let the world watch. Let them see what rot looked like in tailored suits. Arthur cleared his throat. "Mr. Crane, you've been summoned today to address allegations of fiduciary misconduct, hostile restructuring, and reckless corporate sabotage." A murmur of agreement rippled down the table. "You mean transparency?" Gabriel replied calmly. "Transparency," Arthur echoed. "That has cost this company 12% of its market cap. In 2 weeks," Gabriel took a step forward. "You mean the 12% that was inflated through illegal valuation, stacking, and insider options?" Pennington's jaw twitched. Gabriel turned to the room. "You all knew. Maybe not the details. But you knew. The game was rigged. You played it. And now you're upset I flipped the table. Your father would never have. My father buried community housing proposals, bribed zoning committees, forced through evictions. He bet entire neighborhoods. On quarterly margins. Are you proud of that?" A silence. Gabriel let it stretch. Then he opened the folder he brought. Not paper, a tablet. One swipe and the massive wall screen behind him lit up dot line items, shell companies, photos, signed contracts. Audio clips of meetings where board members discussed ways to minimize empathy in urban acquisitions. Gasps one. Man muttered a curse under his breath. Another reached for his phone and stopped. Halfway, Gabriel walked slowly past each chair. "You think this is destruction? This is truth, and I will not apologize for making it visible." Arthur stood. "Your unilateral decisions have triggered massive investor panic. You've alienated the Crane family. Even your mother. She filed a lawsuit. Yes, you've mentioned this board can remove you." Gabriel paused. "Try." The air stilled. He reached into his jacket and withdrew another folder. Hard copy this time, and slid it across the table. An independent shareholder coalition, representing 42.3% of voting equity, has endorsed my restructuring plan. Effective immediately, 5 of you are removed from executive oversight. Gasps again. Real this time. Arthur snapped the folder open. Signed by Lenora Gaines. "Yes," Gabriel said. "And 6,000 individual shareholders tired of watching their investments built on silence and suffering. You'll destroy this company." "No," Gabriel said. "I'll rebuild it from the bones up." Outside, the press-weighted Gabriel emerged into a sea of cameras. Microphones like bayonets pointed at his chest. Reporters barked questions like machine guns. "Mr. Crane, is it true your mother filed injunctions against your leadership? Have you crippled Crane Global's standing in international markets? Are you destroying your father's legacy?" He held up a hand. They hushed. He stepped to the podium. Eyes steady, voice clear. "My name is Gabriel Crane, and I will not hide behind lawyers, press agents, or legacy myths. Stand here as a man, a son, who inherited a kingdom of exploitation and decided not to pass it down." The microphones buzzed. "My father built a towering empire. but he paved it with silence and sealed it with suffering. That ends now. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the key to Crane Tower, the ceremonial gold one given to him at his first executive meeting. This key once opened every door in this company. I'm replacing it. Not with a new key, he held up a sleek black card with a fingerprint sensor, but with access, transparency, ethics, purpose. He paused. Let those who've profited from darkness fear the light. I'm not their executioner. The truth is, the next morning, media dubbed it the public execution. Gabriel Crane's name trended across the internet. Half villain, half prophet. Stock prices dipped again, but social sentiment exploded. Thousands of letters poured in from former employees, evicted tenants, families once priced out of neighborhoods now watching him with renewed hope. You made me believe again. My father was laid off by yours. You're the first Crane I don't want to punch. Please don't stop. Don't let them eat you alive. In the executive lounge, Gabriel sat with Lenora. She sipped her coffee, watched him silently. You know they're going to come harder now, she said. I hope they do, Gabriel replied. I'm done hiding, she smiled. You've got the fire, but fire alone won't last. I've got something better, he said. What's that? Gabriel looked out the window at the skyline. Blueprints. They didn't strike with fists. They struck with whispers. Within days of Gabriel's public reckoning, Crane Global's boardroom became a war zone, not of raised voices, but of subtleties. Schedules were shuffled without notice. Internal. Memos were lost. Analysts mysteriously withdrew their support. And across the financial media, headlines sharpened like blades. Crane Jr. tanks the empire. Vision or vanity. Insider sources say Gabriel Crane is unstable, obsessed with undoing his father, a dangerous crusade. Is this the end of Crane Global? And then came the lawsuit, filed by none other than Clara Whitmore. Crane.Gabriel read it in silence. His mother's signature graced the top in her usual cursive, elegant and cold as glass. The suit alleged negligent mismanagement, undue interference with shareholder rights, and emotional impairment impacting executive function. In other words, they were calling him unstable, erratic, a liability. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just slid the folder closed and said, so be it. Lenora looked at him across the desk, equal parts fury and admiration. She filed this from the same foundation you donated to last month. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Always knew how to smile while driving the knife in. Still want to go ahead with the initiative next week? He looked up, especially now. The initiative was radical, at least two old minds. Gabriel unveiled the human-centric cities. Act at a press conference 3 days later. The plan would restructure Crane Global's entire approach to urban development. 30% of every future. Real estate project allocated to affordable housing, investment in green spaces, public libraries, and medical micro-clinics. Partnering with AI, ethics firms to audit project impacts in real time, profit sharing with the communities they once. Displaced reporters stared in disbelief. Shareholders exploded online. He's gutting the bottom line. This is philanthropy disguised as policy. Gabriel Crane is killing capitalism. But amidst the noise, a quieter audience began to stir. A mother of 3 in Detroit, who'd been evicted by Walter's gentrification project, a school teacher in Queens who lost her pension when the old board/city contracts, a community leader in Chicago who remembered when Gabriel, just 22, ignored her pleas to save her neighborhood. Now he was fighting for them, and some of them began to fight back. With him, then came the fire. Not metaphor, not politics. Real fire. A construction site in Newark, one of the first human-centric pilot projects, was set ablaze in the night. Arson. No fatalities, but millions in damages. Gabriel stood at the blackened skeleton of scaffolding and rebar the next morning.
They died the next morning.
Smell of smoke still clung to the sky. The media had already arrived. A reporter shouted, "Do you still believe in your plan, Mr. Crane?" Gabriel looked at the scorched steel. His hands were in his pockets. his sleeves slightly rolled. "The first time I visited a Crane Global site, I was 8, he said slowly. My father showed me a tower going up in Brooklyn. He told me this is how we bend cities to our will." He turned to the cameras. "Don't want to bend cities anymore. I want to serve them. Even if it means rebuilding them one charred beam at a time." Back at headquarters, more saboteurs emerged. Anonymous tip-offs flooded the compliance department. Half-true scandals from Gabriel's early career were repackaged and leaked. He was accused of nepotism, of mental instability, of running a messianic vanity project. One night, after reviewing 100 hate emails, Gabriel sat alone in his office, the city glittering behind him. He didn't touch his drink, never did anymore. Lenora entered without knocking. "You look like a man trying not to drown in." "Clean water." Gabriel managed a tired smile. "Clean water burns more than filth." She handed him a folder. "Read this." Side were polling numbers. Shocking ones. 0.67% of Americans under 40 supported the human-centric initiative. 72% of minority communities viewed Gabriel as a leader for structural change. Even moderate investors began shifting, not because of morality, but sustainability. "He's too smart to bet on sentiment," Lenora said. "They're starting to believe that you might be the more stable future." Gabriel stared at the numbers, blinking slowly. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about viability, and that terrified his enemies even more. 2 weeks later, Gabriel was summoned to a televised debate. On the other podium stood Victor Loring, former vice chairman of Crane Global. Ousted by Gabriel weeks ago, and darling of the old guard, Crane Global, Loring began, was built on precision, profitability, and power. Mr. Gabriel wants to replace that with poetry, policies, and pity. Laughter. Gabriel waited, then said, "Mr. Loring believes cities are machines. I believe they are living organisms, and you don't heal a wound by doubling down on the infection," the audience murmured. The moderator blinked. Loring's smile faded. "We don't need kings and skyscrapers anymore," Gabriel continued. "We need stewards and neighborhoods. That's the future I'm building." The lawsuits came, the protests, the late-night threats. Gabriel took them all. The crucible burned hot. But he refused to melt. Instead, he forged something new from the heat, a blueprint not just for buildings, but for leadership. And as he walked into the next shareholder, "Assembly, tie loose, hands steady." A new phrase was whispered through the crowd. Not heir, not rebel, not destroyer, but something far more dangerous to the old empire. Architect. It didn't come with applause, or a headline, or a stock spike. It came on a rainy Tuesday in Cleveland. Gabriel was standing beneath a warped tin awning, rain dripping off his collar, watching a bulldozer tear down what was once a payday loan center. Across the cracked sidewalk, a group of children huddled beneath a library tarp, holding books. Their mother stood behind them, arms crossed, skeptical. She'd watched men like him before: clean suits, nice shoes, polished words. They all came with promises. They all left with more than they gave. "You really think this matters?" she asked, voice flat. One block in a city they forgot 20 years ago. Gabriel looked up at her, the mud soaking into his boots. "It matters to the boy who won't grow up believing his zip code is a prison sentence." The woman's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak again. Instead, she stayed, and so did the children. They watched the payday lender crumble. And in its place, they imagined something better. That was the first victory. The second came wrapped in concrete and steel. 6 months prior, Gabriel had announced the Bridge District project in South Chicago, a model development designed entirely under the human-centric city's blueprint. It was his most ambitious plan yet. Eco-efficient housing, local ownership clauses, small business microgrants, and a zero eviction policy during the first 5 years. The board had laughed. The banks refused funding. 3 suppliers pulled out before the first brick was laid, but now the building stood alive with color. Rooftop gardens, ground floor clinics, and classrooms with wide windows and broadband access at the ribbon cutting. A child named Ezekiel ran up to Gabriel and asked, "Is this your castle?" Gabriel knelt down. "No, kid. It's yours." Victor Loring tried to block the permits. Clara Crane tried to halt the financing through probate maneuvering. One senator even accused Gabriel of buying votes with utopian housing. Gabriel didn't retaliate. He just kept building. What his enemies failed to grasp was this: Gabriel didn't care about winning arguments. He cared about proving results. Brick by brick, family by family, and results were difficult to weaponize once they breathed. When the Bridge District welcomed its first 1,000 residents, teachers, nurses, veterans, single mothers, something shifted. The media began calling the project the reverse gentrification miracle. A major financial network ran a special Crane Global 2.0, Profit from Purpose. Suddenly, ESG funds were interested, so were young idealistic architects. So were voters. For the first time since his father's death, Gabriel felt the ground beneath his feet begin to stabilize. But the moment that changed, everything didn't come in a boardroom or a press release. It came in a battered auditorium in the Bronx. Gabriel had been invited to speak at a town hall hosted by a local nonprofit. He almost didn't go, no cameras. Just folding chairs and fluorescent lights. An old man raised his hand during the Q&A. "I lost my brother to your father's project in '96, he said. "They called it urban renewal. They called it exile. Why should I trust his son?" Silence swallowed the room. Gabriel walked down from the stage, stood at eye level with the man, and said, "You shouldn't." The man blinked. Gabriel continued, "Not until I prove I'm not him. Not with words, not with blueprints, but with the lives rebuilt in the shadow of what he destroyed. That's why I came here, not for applause, for accountability." No one clapped, but no one walked out either. Sometimes silence is louder than praise. 2 days later, Gabriel received a call from Geneva. The International Urban Ethics Council had shortlisted Crane Global for the Human Futures Award, the first American company to be considered in over a decade. Lenara called him at midnight. "You just turned a global embarrassment into a benchmark." He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights. "Then we raised the benchmark again." But not every victory tasted sweet. One morning, Gabriel found a package on his doorstep. No return address. Inside was a thin black envelope, a note typed in courier font. "Your father would have burned it all down first." Beneath the note was a photograph of former Crane executive Gabriel had terminated for embezzlement, now found dead in a motel, an apparent suicide. Lenora had warned him. The old empire doesn't die quietly. Gabriel placed the photo face down on his desk. He didn't speak about it again that week. Crane Global's quarterly report was published. For the first time in 6 quarters, revenue stabilized, and it climbed marginally, but undeniably. What the analysts couldn't explain was how the profit margins weren't driven by cost-cutting. They came from new partnerships, city councils, nonprofit developers, and AI firms committed to sustainable forecasting. The company wasn't just making money, it was making sense. And for shareholders battered by years of volatility, sense was seductive. At the annual general meeting, Gabriel stepped onto the stage wearing no tie, no script. Behind him was a screen showing images of the Bridge District, of children playing in rain gardens, of senior citizens in sunlit walkways. He said only this: "We used to build towers for the powerful. Now we build routes for the forgotten." And somehow, in that shift, we've grown stronger. If that's not good business, I don't know what is. The room rose, and for the first time, so did the board, including 2 members who once tried to remove him, not because they were converted, but because they saw what the world now saw: a man who had burned down the inheritance of blood and concrete and rebuilt it with conscience and steel. The glass wall of the Crane Global Conference Suite reflected a city Gabriel no longer recognized, half awake, half crushed under concrete ambition. He stood alone in the silence, watching traffic flicker beneath the skyline his father built. Behind him, the boardroom was still echoing. "You've made your point, Mr. Crane," said Victor Loring, barely hiding the sneer. "But a bleeding heart doesn't run a billion-dollar empire." Gabriel didn't answer. Not to Victor. Not yet. He stared into the night like a man tracking wildfires. His narrowed, calculating where next to dig a line before everything burned. The fire outside had already begun. What no one in that room knew was that Gabriel had been collecting the matches. Weeks earlier, Gabriel had launched a covert audit under a shell firm staffed with forensic accountants. Their only task? Trace every offshore account, undeclared holding, and manipulated tax funnel Crane Enterprises had quietly buried over 4 decades. The results arrived that morning in a sealed dossier marked ashes. $372 million in slush. Accounts 12 properties bought under false names. 7 foreign shell companies. A list of senior executives, some still seated on the board, would sign the papers with impunity. Gabriel read it all in silence. Then he signed a single instruction: prepare voluntary disclosure. "We go first." Lenora stormed into his office when she saw the draft press release. "You're not just lighting a fire. You're sitting in the gasoline," she snapped. "You leak this, and the feds won't pat you on the back. They'll bury you next to your father's secrets." Gabriel didn't flinch. "I'm not leaking it. I'm confessing." Her eyes searched his. "Why?" "Because I'd rather build something clean from ashes than wear a crown made of rot." 2 days later, Gabriel held a press conference in front of the Department of Justice. No suit, no teleprompter. It's just a binder, a microphone. In the stormy eyes of a man walking himself into fire, he read aloud, "I am the legal heir and current CEO of a company built in part on deception, manipulation, and systemic exploitation. I did not create this foundation, but I now own it. And I take full responsibility to dismantle what must be dismantled and rebuild with transparency, integrity, and equity." The media exploded. One anchor called it the greatest corporate seppuku in modern history. Another declared, "This isn't redemption, it's retaliation disguised as virtue." But beneath the noise, something stirred. Whistleblowers came forward. Civil groups offered alliance. And a former HUD secretary posted, "If Gabriel Crane is serious, we may be watching a new kind of capitalism emerge." That night, Gabriel returned to his apartment and found the door ajar. Inside, his mother was waiting. Clara Crane sat at his dining table, glass of red wine untouched before her. "You've embarrassed this family," she said without looking at him. "I freed it," he replied. Her smile was thin and venom-laced. "You think virtue will save you from consequence?" "I'm not trying to be saved. I'm trying to be worthy. You'll destroy what your father built."
"I
already have," he said. "And I'll keep going if it means it won't be rebuilt on silence." She stood slowly, smoothing her dress. "Then you leave me no choice?" Gabriel looked at her, finally letting the weight settle in his voice. "You had a choice. Every time you stayed silent while he lied. Every time you smiled for cameras while families were being displaced. You chose this empire. I choose its end." She left without another word. But the next day, the lawsuit arrived, filed by Clara Elizabeth Crane, against her only son. Gabriel didn't respond publicly. He didn't need to. The fire was already catching. The company's stock dipped, but didn't crash. Investors panicked. But new capital came small, focused ESG funds aligned with his vision. Internally, 2 board members resigned. One issued a statement calling Gabriel reckless and naive. But younger staff, many from working class or minority backgrounds, rallied. They organized town halls. They volunteered in rebuilding zones. For the first time in Crane Global's modern history, its workforce wasn't afraid of its own mission. It was part of it, in a quiet corner of his office. Gabriel placed a framed quote on the wall. It was handwritten by an old janitor from his father's very first project. "We build with our hands, but we become what we build with our choices." Below it, he scribbled one line in pencil, the fire that burns us clean, and in that moment, the heir became the architect. The boardroom was quiet in the way graveyards are quiet everent. Weighted, haunted. Gabriel Crane stood at the head of the long obsidian table. Every chair was filled, but no one met his eyes. In front of him, two folders, one red, one white. The red folder contained a compromise drafted by the surviving members of the old guard. A plan to stabilize the company after months of exposure, lawsuits, and media fire. Keep some of the social initiatives, bury the rest, and return to business. As usual, dressed up in ESG language, the white folder held Gabriel's blueprint. It wasn't just a new Crane Global. It was a revolution. 30% of residential projects to be permanently allocated for affordable housing. Profits reinvested into public infrastructure in cities exploited by past projects. Equity stakes offered to employees from the bottom up. Executive pay caps tied to worker well-being indexes. Full cooperation with federal investigators. No shielding of former executives. Not even family. He didn't pitch it. He declared it. If you sign the red folder, he said, voice steady, I resign. I walk out that door and never return. You may regain stability, but history will remember you as men who chose comfort over change. He laid a hand on the white folder. But if you sign this, you may lose friends, favors, old partners. You'll face backlash. But you'll build something worthy of your children's names. Long pause. Then Elisa Kent, CFO, and once his harshest critic, slid the white folder toward herself. I'd rather rebuild than whitewash. One by one, others followed. Victor Loring hesitated, glared, then signed last. I still think you're a fool, he muttered. But history favors the bold. Outside the building, protesters who once held signs that read Crane kills communities now held banners that said rebuild with us. Gabriel stood at the window, the city glinting beyond, the voices rising like wind through broken scaffolds. And then came the message from his mother's attorneys. Laura Crane had withdrawn the lawsuit. No apology, no explanation. Few hours later, a courier arrived with a single envelope. Inside was a faded photograph of Gabriel as a boy, sitting on his father's lap in front of a construction site. On the back, in her handwriting, he built for himself, built for others. And maybe that's why you will last longer. That night, Gabriel returned to the site of his father's first skyscraper, now slated for partial demolition and reimagining as a mixed-income community hub. He walked the perimeter in the rain, boots heavy with dust and memory. A security guard recognized him. Mr. Crane, you don't have to be out here. Gabriel smiled faintly. I do. Because no one else will remember what it took to undo what we once celebrated. He paused near a wall, etched with names: construction workers, architects, engineers, forgotten in public memory, but immortalized here. He added one more name in charcoal. Alan Reyes, janitor, builder of integrity, the man who once told a young Gabriel, bricks remembered the hands that laid them. Back at headquarters, Gabriel took the elevator to the 74th floor, the executive suite. It was empty now, stripped of portraits, mahogany desks, and silk paneling. He had ordered the whole floor to be converted into a public workspace, part think tank, part innovation lab. Open to employees from every department, no more ivory tower. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by scaffolding and blueprints. Where his father once ruled in shadow, he would now build in daylight. A week later, at the company's first public shareholders forum, Gabriel delivered a speech, not in a suit, but in rolled-up sleeves and dust-stained boots. He spoke plainly. It's not to impress, but to invite. This company will no longer worship quarterly. Gains over generational impact. We will build what heals. It's not just what sells. We will measure success not just in dollars, but in dignity of the homes we raise, the lives we touch, and the cities we help thrive. This is no longer my father's empire. It's yours. It's ours. And it starts now. They didn't cheer. They stood. Hundreds of them, men and women who once feared for their jobs. Now rising to something greater, backstage, Eliza Kent turned to him and asked, "Do you think it'll work?" Gabriel didn't hesitate. Empire built on greed ever lasts. This is built on purpose. It'll outlive all of us. And with that, he stepped into the hallway, past the portraits of the old regime, toward the future, not a throne of gold, but a throne built from ashes, resolve, and the fire of a man who chose to burn down everything to build something that mattered. 10 years later, the city bore no resemblance to the one Gabriel Crane had once inherited. The skyline still glittered, but not with excess. Towering glass no longer blocked the sun from the streets. Instead, buildings rose like open hands, green. Rooftops, communal gardens, solar glass, the terraces where children played and elders rested. Crane Global was now Crane Human Works, a name mocked when it was first announced. Now studied in business schools as the benchmark of conscious capitalism. At the heart of it all stood the Commons, a vast urban plaza. Built atop what used to be the most controversial luxury high-rise of the previous regime, Gabriel had torn it down against every recommendation. In its place, he built a sanctuary, a multi-use space with libraries, affordable housing, daycares, job training centers, and an open-air amphitheater named after his late mentor, Alan Reyes. Today, that amphitheater buzzed with energy. It was Founders Day, and even though Gabriel had refused to make himself the center of the celebration, the city didn't care. Banners with his silhouette fluttered above the crowds. A choir of school children, all from neighborhoods once condemned for demolition, sang a new anthem written in his honor, brick by brick. From the side stage, Eliza Kent, now CEO, watched the event unfold. She turned to a young woman in her early 20s standing beside her, sharp, calm, wearing an old watch that didn't match her polished suit. "That's your cue, Miss Crane," Eliza said with a proud smirk. Naomi Crane stepped forward to the microphone. The crowd hushed. "My father taught me," she began, "that the only empires worth building are the ones you'd be proud to leave to a child who doesn't know your sins." She paused, and that courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's the silent decision to give back land your family took, or to testify against your own board, or to show up every day for 10 years and choose people over profit. The crowd erupted in applause, but Naomi raised a hand. "I'm not here to praise him. You wouldn't want that. I'm here to ask you to remember what he chose, when he could have walked away, when he could have ruled, when he could have been comfortable." Hush fell again. Gabriel Crane didn't just change this company. He changed the air we breathe, the soil we grow on, the stories we pass down. This city remembers his name not because of what he built, but because of what he refused to keep. She turned, motioning toward the giant bronze plaque at the amphitheater's entrance. It read, "Asterisk here stood a tower that blocked the sun, and now light for all." Asterisk Gabriel, Crane across town, in a quieter neighborhood lined with townhomes and jasmine hedges. Gabriel watched the live stream from an old television set balanced on a bookshelf. He was thinner now, gray at the temples. But his eyes still carried the same iron glint. He sipped coffee from a ceramic mug that said, "Integrity is expensive. That's why it's rare." A knock came at the door. It was Lucas, former site manager turned community organizer. "You really weren't going to show up, were you?" Lucas said, half laughing, half scolding. Gabriel shrugged. "They don't need me anymore. That's the point." Lucas said, "They do, but not to worship. To remember how to lead." He tossed Gabriel a Crane Human Works baseball cap. "Put it on. The Commons isn't complete without you." Hours later, as the sun dipped low and golden light washed the city in honey, Gabriel walked unrecognized through the Commons. Children darted around him. A woman handed him a cup of lemonade. A group of teens were painting a mural of the city's transformation, depicting bulldozers dissolving into trees, concrete morphing into classrooms. No one bowed. No one clapped, but they smiled, and that meant more. At the far end of the plaza, he stopped at a bronze statue, not of him, but of 7 workers holding tools, arms linked, standing on broken blueprints. The inscription read, "Asterisk the future is not inherited. It is forged. Asterisk Gabriel sat on a nearby bench. A girl no older than 8 sat beside him, swinging her legs. She was holding a paper sketch, a school project titled The Man Who Gave Back the Sky. Is that about someone real? He asked. Yeah, she said brightly. His name was Mr. Crane. My grandma said he was crazy. But good crazy. Gabriel chuckled. Sounds like a hard guy to live up to. The girl tilted her head. You kind of look like him. He smiled but said nothing. Just as he stood to leave, the girl reached out and offered him the drawing. You can keep it. I made another one for school. He took it gently, nodding. Thank you. And as he walked away, the city glowed around him. Not with neon, but with purpose. Not with towers, but with trust. Gabriel Crane had become more than a name. He had become a blueprint for the future. If you're still with us, then perhaps this story has touched something quiet inside of you. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? A cozy corner of your home, or perhaps some faraway place I've never been to? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every message, and they truly inspire us to continue telling meaningful stories. If Gabriel's journey resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story of courage, kindness, and quiet human change. Thank you for your time today. See you in the next video.